This station, it's step.
Attorney-client relationship has the information shared does not constitute binding legal advice, nor should it be utilized in a court of law. If you have further questions or require legal representation, contact an attorney today. Aloha, and welcome to Law Talk Radio, brought to you by the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm. When you or your loved one's freedom is on the line and you need an aggressive and experienced law firm to defend you, look no further than the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm. We only offer straightforward, well-reasoned legal advice, and we always promise to represent our clients the way we would want to be represented ourselves. And now, enjoy this edition of Law Talk Radio, brought to you by the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm, featuring attorney Marc J. Victor and your host, Rick Hamada, on News Radio 830 KHVH.
And there we have it. Aloha, kakahiaka, one and all. It is a gorgeous Saturday morning here on News Radio 830 KHVH, and always looking forward to Law Talk with the Attorneys for Freedom, specifically with my brother. He is attorney Marc J. Victor, and we connect today. Marc, we wish you aloha. Good morning.
Hey, aloha to you, Rick. Great to be with you. Happy Saturday, and it's another great day to be alive, man.
And I'm going to make that 3 exclamation points over what you've just said, without a doubt. We have a heck of a show today because we're going to concentrate a great deal on 2A, and especially the latest developments here at home in regard to a particular bill, Bill 57, that we've debated, discussed in the past, but now there is more movement on legislation relating to our Second Amendment rights. However, attorney Marc J. Victor, want to get caught up, wish you aloha and a very good morning, and I see that you have your Live and Let Live gorgeous T-shirt on display today.
Yeah, I do, brother. I am right after the show. I am slated to give a speech at the Crossroads of the West gun show here in Arizona, which is where I am at the moment. It's a gun show that I've been speaking at for the last, 20, 25 years. And it's really my first talk since the Bruen case was decided. And I know people in Arizona tend to think that, well, this doesn't really affect us here in Arizona because we've already got the right to keep and bear arms and to bring them outside. But you know what, Rick? They're wrong about that. Bruen was bigger than just the issue about whether you get to take firearms outside. It really is about how we analyze Second Amendment cases. We've talked about this before because, as you know, this has all kinds of implications. It's now not about whether the restriction impinges on the individual right to keep and bear arms. It's now about whether the restriction is sort of one of these part of the historical tradition of regulating firearms. And that's a much tougher argument for the state to regulate firearms. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but I'm excited about talking about that today at the gun show. I'm wearing my Live and Let Live. You know, I'm always happy at a moment's notice to talk about Live and Let Live and freedom and getting our country back on the right track. So that's why I'm wearing the somewhat provocative Live and Let Live today.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have a very special guest in studio who, coincidentally or not coincidentally enough, is displaying the very same. Marc, share with us. Today we back in studio with a good friend.
Yeah, today really happy to have Phil Acosta back. He is from Aloha Harvest. He's the executive director, and they're just doing a heck of a job over there at Aloha Harvest. You know, what they're about is picking up food from different distributors, mostly wholesalers, and then redistributing that food to people who need it. They've redistributed millions and millions of pounds of food. They have 420 donors that they're working with now. At least this is as of last year. And 232 recipient agencies. They distributed over 3.8 million pounds of food just last year. Food that would have been wasted. So this is a really great charity. And Phil's here to talk about it. It's the perfect time of year to have this discussion. So welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks, Marc. Thanks, Rick.
Phil, would you do us a favor? Just a little bit about yourself. Welcome back in studio, but if you could remind us a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. Like Mark said, I'm the executive director at Aloha Harvest. I've been there since September 2019, so this was pre-pandemic. Last 3 years have been, it seemed like 3 months. You know, it's been a good time. Lots of good things that we've done at Aloha Harvest. I've been working in the nonprofit world for a little over 7 years now.
You tap your microphone for me, please. Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, why don't we do this? Let me make sure that we are good to go. Okay. Go ahead, Phil. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry about that. Yeah. It's, we're an Oahu-based nonprofit. Am I coming through better? Yeah. And, you know, like Mark said, we've rescued over 31 million pounds since we were started in 1999. So, you know, for me, growing up poor as a here out in Waianae, that was the thing for us. Going to shelter, food pantries, and relying on government services. And so, for me to be able to provide the service now, you know, as part of my profession, you know, it's like a really fulfilling full circle moment for me. And you know, there's so much the food that we bring in. You know, like over 90% of the food that we bring in out from outside of Hawaii is so expensive. And to think that over a third of that goes to waste, it never gets eaten, you know, that's a shame. And especially now with just the living expenses so high, a lot of people are still, you know, even post-pandemic, a lot of folks are still hurting. And so it's good to remind folks about the food insecurity needs, and also just this problem about food waste, and it shouldn't be a thing. And we're trying to normalize that to go towards zero waste.
You mentioned food insecurity thing, but it is profound.
Yeah.
All ages, all neighborhoods, all parts of the island. I don't think anybody's really insulated. And describe technically what food insecurity truly is, Phil.
Well, you know, folks that don't have regular access to food that'll sustain them for the day, and recent numbers say 1 in 6 in Hawaii are food insecure, and so they rely on some sort of assistance, like Aloha Harvest or the Hawaii Food Bank or Salvation Army, for instance, to get that extra sustenance for them. And so there's a lot of folks, and most of them are working families. It's just that, you know, at the end of the day, with your gas and your rent and other living expenses, sometimes food is one of those things that you cut out. And so instead of 3 squares, maybe you get 1 or 2, and so they need some assistance there. And so that's something that's an ongoing, that it's actually been increasing, what I've seen in my time here at Aloha Harvest. And so we want to get the word out to more folks. You have access to food, you have access to funds, you know, reach out to us, and we'll make it happen.
Talking with Phil Acosta again, and Mark, it's profound, the scenario here at home. And Phil made references to inflationary cost, etc. But if you go to a supermarket, and I'm not going to pick one in particular, any of them, I know because I shop. I'm in stores all the time trying to feed our family. Brother, it is not uncommon, one single bag, and I'm not being over the top. You're looking at one bag, $40, $50, $60 for basics. If you're looking at dairy, if you're looking at fresh vegetable, if you eat poorly, no problem. You can get ramen for like 10 for $1 still in some. But if you're trying to feed your family in a healthy sustenance way, Brother Mark, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, no question about that, Rick. And, you know, we should really just take a moment and think about the statistic that Phil put out there. 1 out of 6? Are you kidding me? We should be embarrassed about, here we are in 2022, living in a first world country. We got cell phones. We're putting people up into space now. And 1 out of 6 people are experiencing food insecurity. It's just outrageous. This is not, this is an artificial thing that's being caused by the crazy policies that our government puts out. But the good news is you got people in the private sector like Phil who are stepping up and taking action to solve this problem. One of the things I learned is that, we got all these rules and regulations and they can't pick up food. You can't bake food and just donate it to Aloha Harvest. But what you can do is connect them with people like, supermarkets, other businesses. If they're wasting food, then you can say to them, hey, look, there's this charity out there called Aloha Harvest. They'll come and pick it up and redistribute it. Also, I know it's not probably the right time of year right now, but there's a lot of people in Hawaii that got a lot of those beautiful fruit trees that are dropping avocados and all kinds of different fruits and vegetables. You can donate that stuff to Aloha Harvest. You get together with your neighbors, put it all in a crate or a bucket or something, and do something good with it rather than just letting it rot on the ground. So this is one of those things. It's that time of year. We should all be thinking about helping our fellow brothers and sisters out. And Aloha Harvest is, food is one of those basic things, and they're just doing great things. And so I want to thank Phil publicly and here on the radio for what you're doing, because you're one of those guys who's actually making a difference out in the world. So a big mahalo to Phil and Aloha Harvest.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. I want to follow up on a couple of things that you mentioned there, like the fruit trees. Actually, tomorrow we're going out to a ranch out on the North Shore and harvesting a grove of avocados. We've got this new program that we started spring of last year. It's a volunteer-led effort called Community Harvest, and so we bring volunteers out to small farms, gardens, backyards, even to pick, like you said, those excess fruits. And we don't want all that stuff to go and fall on the ground. Mangoes on the ground, that's just a shame. And so tomorrow, actually, we're picking a bunch of avocados, and that some of that will go to the farm, some will go to us, and we'll redistribute it to the charities out there on the North Shore. And then Ricky had also talked about, going to the grocery stores. Mm-hmm. And so it's great that, we have actually quite a bit of business partners that are doing the right thing. Foodland, for instance, they're one of our largest and most consistent donors. And so we pick up from each one of their stores here on Oahu every day. And, the range of stuff that they provide to us, whether it's deli items or produce, or canned and frozen meats, it's in the hundreds of pounds every day, and so that really adds up. And we provide that service to the donors and the recipient agencies free of charge. So folks that are out there, if you don't have access to a grove of avocado trees or a grocery store, there's always a way that you could help us out, whether it's volunteering or providing some funds. And one more shout out I wanted to put out was to Diotani Produce. Later this month, they're actually donating an entire 40-foot container full of fresh produce that they've procured. And we will do just a veggie giveaway closer to Christmas. And so that's a really, really cool thing for us to, like Rick, you were saying about eating healthy. Most people can't afford to do that. So hopefully this is just a little help that we can bring out to the community in association with Diotani Produce and St. Louis School.
Is there social media platforms, websites, all the contact information to connect with you, Phil?
Absolutely. Best way to get a hold of us, info@alohaharvest.org. You can also, check us out on social media at Aloha Harvest, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Reach out to us at any time, and we'll be glad to kick up some ideas to get more food to more people, and just really prevent that food from going to waste.
Yeah, waste is a heck of a word when it comes to food, Mark. And I know that my friends in the restaurant industry, they're, for the most part, aware and acutely aware. However, there's an inevitability that folks, when they consume, they will not be responsible.
Right.
They will either over-order or they will over-prepare. And the sheer amount of food that is, wow, it's substantial.
Yeah, and on the website for Aloha Harvest, which is just alohaharvest.org, you can see the top donors on there. Wouldn't you know? The top 10 donors are all evil, money grubbing corporations. Foodland, and of course, I'm saying this sarcastically, right? Foodland alone, the top donor of food, 61,000 pounds of food donated. I think this is last year in 2021. And then you can go right down the line. You see Whole Foods, you see Zippy's on there, different bakeries, all corporations that are in business to make money and employ people. Why are we making it so difficult for corporations to do business in Hawaii? This doesn't help anybody. I know it's a slightly different topic, one that's always close to my heart, but I just wanted to point that out. We got businesses giving back to the community as they should be.
And Marc J. Victor, final thoughts for Phil Acosta today.
I just want to thank Phil for what he's doing, for what he started with this organization, for him pushing it forward. We know the government can't solve all our problems, and it can't, most of the problems it creates. We got to get together and help each other, right? Humans helping other humans, and that's exactly what's going on. It's that time of year. So, this is a place you can make a donation tax-free. So I hope people consider Aloha Harvest. Check it out, alohaharvest.org. Anything else you want to say, Phil?
No, Mark, thanks. A lot of information for the folks there to consume. But yeah, check us out on our website. You can get all the information there. And, whether you're donating your time, treasures, or your talent, we welcome that. We're always looking for individuals and organizations and corporations to, donate to the cause.
And there we have it. Phil Acosta, thanks so very much. It's good to see you again.
Thanks, Rick.
And we'll be back with attorney Marc J. Victor as Law Talk continues in a few short moments. Once again, attorneysforfreedom.com. We'll get into some details about what's taking place today. And attorney Marc J. Victor returns in a moment.
Law Talk Radio will return after these messages.
Are you frustrated with the constant bickering between the Republicans and the Democrats? Are you concerned about the ever-deepening divide in our country between groups of people who can't even seem to talk to each other anymore? Well, there's a new political movement growing throughout the world right now, the new Live and Let Live global peace movement, and it's attracting reasonable people who recognize that competent adults should be in charge of their own lives. We are inspiring people to be good humans. See liveandletlive.org for details and become part of the solution.
Hi, folks. Rick Hamada here. I tell you all the time, the law touches your life every single day, whether you like it or not. It's not a question of if, it is a question of when you may need legal representation, legal advice, your own attorney. It can be stratospherically expensive. However, the Attorneys for Freedom, Attorneys on Retainer program could be the answer for you. For a small initiation, small monthly fee, you can get all the benefits of representation from the Attorneys for Freedom law firm via the Attorneys on Retainer program. And let me tell you this, I signed up. I am a member of AOR because I see not only the value, however, I want to have the confidence that I have the Attorneys for Freedom in my corner. You can too. Log on to Attorneys for Freedom, click on the red Attorneys on Retainer tab, and you, my friends, could have legal representation today.
Welcome back to Law Talk Radio, brought to you by the Attorneys for Freedom law firm.
Once again, we're back. It is Law Talk here on News Radio 830 KHVH with the Attorneys for Freedom, featuring attorney Marc J. Victor. Mark, I know we have some few minutes before the bottom of the hour, but thank you for the invitation and for Phil to appear, because there's nothing more substantive, and during this time of year where folks are really paying attention to the very basics and how to provide best for their friends and families.
Yeah, I know it's called Law Talk, and we've been known to stray here and there from strictly legal questions, but this is an important one. Phil's doing great work. Plus, he actually walked in with a "Live and Let Live" shirt on
Yes, he
today, which
did.
I thought was pretty cool. And a lot of people don't know, but he's a long time, I think, lifetime friend of our marketing director here at the Attorneys for Freedom law firm, Eric Manmano. He's buddies with Phil for just a long time. And he said, Mark, Phil is just a great guy, salt of the earth kind of guy, doing the right thing for the right reasons. And those are the kind of people that I want to take a little time out and just highlight because they're doing great things for the community.
We're dialed in together once again each and every Saturday at this time. I know that we're going to take our only break at the bottom of the hour. And before we do, I just want to check in with Brother Marc J. Victor. How are you doing, my man? After your spirited run for U.S. Senate that generated incredible amounts of news, punditry, and the dynamics within the state of Arizona, now that has passed, how are things with you?
Rick, when I say things like, happy to be alive and this and that, I really mean it. And so I try to stay focused on the things that I can control. And so, the Senate run, my goal was to do the best I could do at getting the message out. And was it perfect? No, I could have done better on some things. I've learned some things I could have improved. But for the most part, I think I did what was within my control. And everything is temporary, including our own lives. And I try to cherish what we have at this very moment, live for right now. And so that's what I'm doing. We live in the greatest country in the world to live in. Whether you're in Hawaii or you're in Arizona, you are in a great place. And so I try to step back from, all the things we want and all the things we're attached to, and just try to spend a few moments thinking about what we actually have, that we live as well as we do. I'm disappointed that 1 in 6 have food insecurity, but 5 in 6 don't. And that's a good point as well. In the 1 in 6, they're getting help from people like Phil Acosta. So, the world on a macro scale, it's moving in the right direction. We got a lot of problems, but you do what you can do. And I feel like I did that in the Senate run. I'm gearing up. Maybe I'll run as a Republican this time. I don't know. But I'm not done trying to change the world and move things in the right direction. So I'm pumped up, man. Life is good.
No, we do. And that's a very good point to make in the remaining just a couple of minutes before the bottom. And that is, we're going to do it again, because there are grave concerns about Bill 57 in the Honolulu City Council, along with other initiatives regarding our rights. But just as much as that there are challenges aplenty, there are many wonderful, beneficial, and causes for celebration that we should embrace as well. And the word balance is so very important. Mark, before we take this short break, what are some of the really positive aspects about the condition of our lives?
Oh my God, so many. It's hard to even. First off, we live better than the best kings lived just a few hundred years ago. The fact I was working out at the gym with John Harris this morning, who usually makes an appearance and talks about AOR, and he had a little surgery on his back, and he was talking to me about how good his back is. And I said, it's good to be alive in 2022, where we have great medical care. I mean, is it perfect? No. Could it be better? Yes. Should we strive to improve it? Yes. But we're still benefiting from great technology and advancements that human beings have accomplished, and we should be really proud of our species, of where we've come so far and where we are right now, and really recognize that everything is temporary, everything, and just try to take a few minutes and step back and enjoy everything. I think that, like I said, the world is moving in the right direction. I know it's hard. Sometimes people cringe when I say things like that because they're looking at, what's going on the 5,000 foot level, but there've always been problems, on the ground level. We're never going to reach perfection or utopia. There'll always be a struggle. But in the macro sense, at the 30,000 foot view, if you want to really enjoy your life, you got ample reasons to do so. Start with the fact that you're alive right now. You won't be alive forever. Start with the fact that you probably have relatively good access to food and health care and shelter. And people listen to this show, you live in Hawaii. I mean, come on. You live in probably the best place to live in the entire world. Go out and take a look at the beach today and pick one of those avocados off the tree and just enjoy this moment right now. So lots of great things. If you are willing to look and recognize that the glass is half full, not just half empty, but half full. And it didn't have to be half full. It is half full. And be happy about where we're at. It's one of the reasons I just put a little plug out there. I've been a practicing Stoic now for a little while. And Stoicism, that what the Romans and Greeks came up with 2,000 years ago, very, very good insights and perspectives on just life, some psychological ideas about really enjoying life and learning to love the life that you find yourself living, I think is one of the key touchstones. And it's something I'm working on and studying. It's really dramatically improved my life and my outlook.
Before we do break, please, could you share some destinations where you engage in thoughtful and passionate conversations, discussions? For instance, Stoicism, if you have podcasts, if you have a library, if there's some source people can go to learn more about you.
Yeah, well, learn more about me, people can go to the Attorneys for Freedom law firm. They could also go to liveandletliverevolution.com. That's my political website. Soon we're going to be kicking off a brand new website, marcjvictor.com, where it's going to be kind of the center of the Marc J. Victor world, and pretty much anything I want to talk about and is going to be on there. And I'm going to be starting a new podcast likely at some point, bringing on new interesting guests. So yeah, we'll be talking about it on Peace Radicals. But for people who are interested in, maybe just trying to improve the world, but also learning to live your best life while you're improving the world, right? Because I don't want to dedicate every second of my life to improving the world. I got seconds in there where I want to enjoy and really savor the fact that I'm alive and that I'm with my brother Rick right now, and how much I enjoy doing Law Talk with you, Rick, and having the listeners in Hawaii. We live charmed lives. We should take a moment out and recognize that. And, I'd love to do a show just where we talk about meditation, or a show where we talk about Stoicism, or a show where we talk about the importance of having a good diet and exercise and having the right perspective, or the word you mentioned, balance, how important balance is in our lives. We did a show and we talked about parenting, how important that is. I said in court just yesterday how important parenting, the number one cause of criminal activity, in my view, after 28 years of practice, and I don't get anybody to disagree with me on this, is bad parenting. We got to be better parents. That's why I wanted to devote a show to parenting, and I'd love to do another one in the future.
Amen to all of that and more, Brother Marc. I agree 1,000%. A very, very short break, accommodate our bottom of the hour, but when we return, we'll return with a focus on Second Amendment and the role that Second Amendment rights are playing here at home in Hawaii and beyond. Stay with us. We'll return in a moment.
Law Talk Radio will return after these messages.
This is attorney Marc J. Victor with the Attorneys for Freedom law firm. Our law firm is well known for zealously representing people charged with serious crimes. But did you know we also represent people in both personal injury and civil rights matters? If you've been seriously injured in an accident or as a result of a civil rights violation, we'd be happy to discuss your case with you. No charge for the meeting and no fee unless we recover money damages for you. Located in Bishop Square or online at attorneysforfreedom.com.
Hi, folks. Rick Hamada here. I tell you all the time, the law touches your life every single day, whether you like it or not. It's not a question of if, it is a question of when you may need legal representation, legal advice, your own attorney. It can be stratospherically expensive. However, the Attorneys for Freedom, Attorneys on Retainer program could be the answer for you. For a small initiation, small monthly fee, you can get all the benefits of representation from the Attorneys for Freedom law firm via the Attorneys on Retainer program. And let me tell you this, I signed up. I am a member of AOR because I see not only the value, however, I want to have the confidence that I have the Attorneys for Freedom in my corner. You can too. Log on to Attorneys for Freedom, click on the red Attorneys on Retainer tab, and you, my friends, could have legal representation today.
Welcome back to Law Talk Radio, brought to you by the Attorneys for Freedom law firm.
And we do return as promised. But I do, before we jump in, the attorneys on retainer, I meant every single word of what I said about AOR. And I encourage you to log on, learn more, and Brother Jonathan will be with us in future programs to further explain. But it starts with logging in to Attorneys for Freedom, Attorneys on Retainer, and make sure that you are protected in a very litigious world in which we live. Speaking of litigious, Brother Mark, here we go. Bill 57 before the City Council. It was promoted by Mayor Rick Blangiardi and others to put further constraints on the utilization, concealed carry of firearms here in the city and county of Honolulu. Brother Marc J. Victor, that's the gist, but there's so much more surrounding this issue. I turn it over to you.
Yeah, Rick, there's lots to talk about here, obviously. Everybody knows if they've been listening to me for any time, I always like to start at the 30,000-foot view. And, something very important happened during the Donald Trump years, right? The Supreme Court had what I would call rather dramatic shift. We got 3 different justices up there, one of whom we replaced a left-wing judge with a right-wing judge. And that makes a big difference on Second Amendment issues. And as soon as that happened, long before the Bruen case came out, and you may recall, we predicted that we would get this result on this case at least 6 months to a year before the case came out. I said, and I'll say again today at the gun show, that I am not sweating Second Amendment issues. Yes, we're going to have some litigation. We're going to have aggravation because there are people who live among us who have attitudes that say things like, I don't like guns and I don't want anybody else to have a gun. I don't want them to carry guns and things like that. But the Supreme Court, in my view, is the most powerful of the 3 branches of government, has been since Marbury versus Madison. What happened was they took the power to say what the Constitution means. And the Constitution's the highest law of the land. So they get to say what the Second Amendment means. And, starting in the Heller case, they started saying, radically different things than some people in the country believed about the Second Amendment. Prior to the Heller case in 2008, it was an open question about whether the Second Amendment even protected an individual right to keep and bear arms. Well, Heller, they said, guess what? It actually means what it says. It does. Mm-hmm. And then we get to the Bruen case, and we're sort of vindicated here. We got a very strong majority that is saying that the Second Amendment means what it says, and we're going to take steps to actually hand down decisions consistent with that. And now, as I said at the beginning, I think that the biggest change in that case is not the realization that you can take your firearm outside, although this was a contested point until this case. But really, it's the how are we now going to think about and adjudicate Second Amendment issues? So basically what they said is, look, if this isn't something that was being enforced at the time the Second Amendment was adopted, which still isn't quite clear, right? There's going to be litigation about, are we talking about the time the Bill of Rights was brought in, or later on when the 14th Amendment was incorporated? Or it could even be argued it was when McDonald was decided, which was after Heller, when the Second Amendment was determined to apply to the state. So it's just, in my view, and if you read the Bruen case, you'll see this is a very hard standard to actually implement. There's a lot of discretion here. But nonetheless, we are where we are. We're in a very pro-Second Amendment climate. Now, that's at the Supreme Court. At the city and county of Honolulu, we're in a different place. We've got people who just maybe haven't read the case yet, but they're doing, it seems, and Mayor Blangiardi seems like a good guy to me. And I met him. I know you have him in studio, and I often listen when you have him in studio. And I like the guy. He seems like a very genuine guy, but he certainly strikes me as somebody who doesn't like the decision in Bruen. And they're putting forth regulations that look pretty clear to me that are going to be found to violate the Second Amendment. And now we have a case because, of course, they're doing the exact same thing in New York that they're trying to do in Hawaii. but they're a little further down the road in New York. And we got a decision, a preliminary injunction, which means that, the court hasn't finally decided this question, but the court has said, look, I think one side's going to win here, and there's going to be damage if we don't sort of put an injunction in place. So there's this Antonyuk case, Antonyuk. People can look that up if they just put that into their search engine and they search that with New York or preliminary injunction. What they're going to find is a very well-reasoned decision by a federal district judge in the Northern District of New York that came out just about a month ago, November 7th of this year, where they went through almost identical regulations and restrictions to what is currently being proposed in Honolulu. Now, to be fair, this is a Northern District of New York case. It's not binding on the district where we are in the Ninth Circuit, but I have every reason to think that this is the way the Supreme Court's ultimately going to decide. So we can go down the list and talk about what that decision said, and I would imagine the very similar decision is going to come out of the district court in Honolulu when we challenge all this stuff as well, the same stuff they're planning right now.
I don't know if this is a political or a legal or a combination of explanation, but it's being advanced that despite any restriction, the issuance of carry conceal permits are going to take place, which is unprecedented in the history of our state. And so you should be grateful. You should acknowledge and affirm that concealed carry permits are being issued. What is the big deal coming from the proponents of this bill?
Well, of course, it's always the issue of the exception swallowing up the rule, right? I mean, it's easy to say you have a right to do X, Y, and Z, but of course it's subject to some unbridled government regulator's discretion. And that's essentially, what we're looking at with some of these restrictions, right? Like some of the things that have not been allowed is requirements in New York. They said things like, okay, you got to demonstrate you have a good general moral character. Well, the court said, sorry, that's not the kind of restriction that we're going to allow to exercise your Second Amendment right. There were requirements like provide a list of your family members and people who you cohabit with. The court said, no, this isn't a legitimate thing that you can require somebody who wants a permit to have to cough up. Also things like, if you can believe it, a list of your social media accounts for the past 3 years. Can you believe legislators in New York thought that they would make contingent somebody's right to keep and bear arms outside their home on some government bureaucrat's review of a list of social media accounts for the past 3 years? The court said, sorry, we're not going to allow that kind of a restriction. And then this sort of catch-all, other reasonably necessary information related to review the application. Okay, what the heck does that mean? And that's what the court said. Look, those kinds of things, sorry, it's not going to be allowed to be enforced. So those restrictions and requirements are out. Also, there were these ideas that sensitive places, in Heller, they said, look, we're not saying that guns can't be banned at sensitive places. But of course, they didn't break out exactly what they mean by sensitive places. And so, New York essentially tried to say, well, the city of New York is a sensitive place. You can imagine the anti-gun crowd in Honolulu would love to say, well, the city and county of Honolulu are sensitive places, therefore you can't carry your firearm there. But there are some answers coming through now where the court has said, yes, these are sensitive places. What kinds of places are they talking about? Government buildings. Courts have said, and in this case in New York, yes, government buildings are sensitive places. Libraries and public playgrounds. I'm not sure I agree with that, but the court has said, yep, those are sensitive places. Schools, those are sensitive places. What's the net effect of being a sensitive place? Well, the net effect is, based on what was said in Heller, that it's likely going to be permissible to ban guns from sensitive places. On the other hand, some things that have been found not to be sensitive places. Here's the list, and it's rather lengthy, and you'll find lots of commonalities to things that are being proposed right now in Hawaii. Any location providing behavioral health or chemical dependence care. That's a pretty broad brush. And the court said in this preliminary injunction, sorry, that's not a sensitive place. You can't just wholesale ban guns from this behavioral health places or places that offer drug counseling. Also on the list, and this seems familiar to what's being proposed in Hawaii as well, places of worship, churches, temples, mosques. Court said, sorry, you can't just ban guns from these places. Public parks and zoos, those are not sensitive places. Airports, so long as federal regulations, there are other federal regulations that involve airports. So long as those are followed, you can't just say, sorry, you can't bring your gun to an airport. Buses and vans, not sensitive places. Restaurants that serve alcohol, another one that's on the list of things places sought to be labeled as sensitive. Well, the court in New York said, no, sorry, just because a restaurant serves alcohol, you can't just wholesale ban guns. Theaters, conference centers, banquet halls, all have been found in the New York case not sensitive places. This one is one of my favorites, public gatherings. Well, just because there's a public gathering, the court said, sorry, not a sensitive place, right? And then this other, what I would call harebrained scheme, private property where the owner has not yet given expressed consent to bear arms. This is another one they're trying to push through in Hawaii. I wonder where they got this idea from, right, out of New York. Well, the court in New York said, sorry, no, that is not. In other words, every piece of private property where the owner hasn't already in advance said you can bring your gun, that is not a sensitive place. And so, that's a pretty extensive list, and you can kind of get a feel of where the court's going here. It's not going to allow almost all of these restrictions that I think are being proposed right now. Other requirements or restrictions where they're permitted, it should be no surprise here. Convicted felons, okay, that's something the court has said. And I think that's too broad. I think it should be violent felons, but nobody's asking Mark Victor for my opinion on this. But right now, the way the law stands is convicted felons. Interesting to note, Judge Barrett previously authored a law review article where she seemed to indicate that she agrees with me on this. Of course, she didn't mention me, but she agrees with the position I'm putting forward that convicted felons is too broad. It should be violent felons, not any felon, right? There's lots of property crimes, nonviolent type crimes. There's no reason to think someone is a danger with a firearm. Also, restrictions permitted for people who are not competent. Okay, this makes sense. Danger if they're displaying a dangerous behavior, this makes sense. The court did allow restrictions where they said you got to provide 4 character letters. The court did allow a restriction that is up to 18 hours of training and associated costs. But interesting on that one, Rick, they said, well, the cost, if it's in the hundreds, that's probably okay. But if it's an exorbitant fee, whatever that is, not defined in the case, if it's an exorbitant fee, that's not going to be allowed. Now, I don't know what the court's going to find to be an exorbitant fee, but my guess is if this training requirement starts creeping into the thousands of dollars, I think courts may very well say, sorry, that's an exorbitant fee. We're not going to allow it. And then this question about an in-person meeting. Do you need to show up and do an interview with somebody? The court said, okay, we're going to allow it for right now, but not really sure. Because remember, this is a preliminary injunction. The court said, I'm not sure how I'm going to rule on this in the permanent decision on the case. And the court came out and specifically said, I may very well reconsider this. But for right now, we're going to go with the in-person interview and say it's allowable. So you can kind of see where the court is coming down. I think the court's coming in a mostly reasonable spot here, right? I mean, only the most, I think, unreasonable people are going to say, yeah, people who are incompetent should be able to carry firearms. No training should be required, things like that. Okay, to me, that's going too far. And the reason that goes too far is because people in these kinds of positions actually are presenting risks of danger to other people. And that, of course, as you know, just from live and let live, right? That violates rule number one. You're putting other people in danger, and that's the one thing you shouldn't be allowed to do. So overall, in the big scheme of things, I think we're going to be okay here, but we're going to have to, unfortunately, go through what I would call a litigation jungle to try to litigate all of these restrictions. Now, the good news here, this was all done in one case. And so I expect that when we do get the final list of restrictions and regulations and requirements, I don't know if it'll be us or some other lawyer in town, will put together a lawsuit that lists all of them. And then it will be probably a federal district judge in Honolulu who's going to say thumbs up on this one, thumbs down on that one. And eventually it'll wind up at the Ninth Circuit. And hopefully that'll be the last stop. We won't have to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But my guess is we're going to be talking about a case down the road in a year or two that has the Supreme Court speaking with the final thumbs up or thumbs down on these types of restrictions. But, there'll be new ones proposed after that. So good for lawyers who like to litigate these things like us, but probably not so great for the people who just want to check the boxes, do what they got to do, and then carry a firearm outside their home for self-protection of themselves or others.
So there is a separation between Bill 57 and the sensitivity aspect, and then the restrictions and regulations that were announced by HPD Police Chief Joe Logan. And within those, the body of those restrictions or conditions upon issuance, has there been any feedback from the general public saying, Mark, wait a second, I have to pass a shooting test that has from this distance and then this distance, and I have to hit that. Oh, and by the way, I have to go in every year and renew and redo all the paperwork. I have to redo and resubmit, etc. Oh, and by the way, I can only go to this instructor. I can't go to that instructor because this one's accepted and that one's not, etc. Are there legal challenges afoot for the restrictions that HPD Chief Joe Logan has put forward? And can the two be commingled in any legal action from the police department and the chief and the city council and the mayor?
Yeah, good questions, Rick. I can't speak to what other lawyers are up to. I'm not aware of any suits that have been filed yet. They may be unripe at the moment because my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, is that these regulations aren't finalized yet, that they're on their way to coming out. But I think once they come out, I expect that we'll have a lawsuit or two. Of course, we're available and would love to bring these lawsuits. I think whoever brings them is going to win them as to most of these issues. But you know exactly where the line is, Rick, and how much training is too much. Do you have to requalify? How often? What's the cost? We don't know the answers to this. And so the court's going to have to chart a course. But, I would encourage people who are interested in this area of the law to read that preliminary injunction, because what I think's interesting about it is the way that the federal judge analyzed each of these questions. The federal judge went back and said, okay, is this something that there's in the historical record? And they go all the way back 200 years ago to say, well, were there restrictions in place? What did the restrictions say? How broadly were they out there? How were they enforced? These kinds of things. It's a very difficult analysis. And the other side, I think, is going to have, when I say the other side, what I'll call the anti-gun side, is having a very hard time showing that there was a sort of preponderance of these types of restrictions out there at the beginning when the Second Amendment was adopted. I don't know if this is the right interpretation or way to analyze the Second Amendment. Frankly, I thought what they laid out earlier in Heller made some sense. But this change here, I think, is going to make it a lot harder for the anti-gun crowd to put regulations on the right to keep and bear arms. Some of that will be good. Some of that will be bad.
So other counties have begun issuing the permits. However, they're under the condition of each individual county. On our county, Chief Joe had the public hearings, vetted, and then announced that there will be issuances of concealed carry permits. But they're in subscription to what was determined during those hearings and what was codified at the conclusion. So there's the one set saying, listen, you do all this, we'll issue a permit. It's the secondary, it's the parallel of the sensitivity. So until that's until that's legislated in the city council, first hearing was this past week. There'll be a second hearing and a final third reading before it has a final vote and then goes to the mayor for signature. If it passes, what do we do legally in the meantime if the chief issues a concealed carry permit with his restrictions that have been codified? What does it mean about transferring, utilizing, carrying in the areas that are up in question now in the city council?
Well, one of the things about bringing a lawsuit is you have to have something special called standing, which means you have to have an injury of some type, or you have to be affected by the legislation. So you may not like something about the restrictions, but if they actually issue the permit and you got a permit and now you're able to carry, you're probably not in a position, because you don't have standing, to challenge it. So we got to find some plaintiffs who have either applied or can state that they intend to apply and they're not going to be allowed to carry, or better yet, they were denied the permit, right? That's the class of person we're looking for: people who live there, people who want a permit, people who applied for a permit, people who were denied for a reason that we think we can challenge, and that will be the argument. It'll be good to lump a bunch of these together, which is why, from the beginning, months ago, I've been encouraging people to band together, group together, because, it's not free to bring lawsuits. There are court costs, there are courts. We don't do them for free. I generally reduce the fees when I say there's a fight for freedom in there. And so, but we want some skin in the game, because it costs us money and time to put lawyers on tasks to do good work. And so people should band together so no one person has to bear the financial responsibility of the lawsuit. But yeah, it's going to be great to challenge this stuff. I hope the courts in Honolulu and the district court do the right thing. I think they will. I think we're going to get favorable decisions. My prediction is we will get a favorable decision out of the district court here in Honolulu, because I think the law is pretty clear. And then I think while the other side may appeal, I think the Ninth Circuit's going to affirm, and that's probably going to be the end of the road. But you never know. Sometimes they make it expensive, and they will waste taxpayer money to litigate this stuff. Is also my prediction on the other side. So we'll have to just see how it goes.
I know we got to roll, but I encourage attorneys on retainer that, folks, if you are embroiled in all this roller coaster effect, both legally and from a political standpoint, you know what? Your exposure is great, because the clarity of what you cannot do in the eyes of the law is a little malleable right now. So attorneys for freedom and attorneys on retainer can be the partners that you will benefit from as you traverse what's taking place. Brother Mark, we have 10 seconds. Final thought.
Yeah, there's really two ways to raise this issue. One way is, you carried your firearm outside when you didn't have a permit to do so. That's called being a criminal and being charged with a crime. We can defend it that way. Don't do that. Let's be proactive and bring civil litigation before people violate the law.
Thank you very much, Attorney Marc J. Victor, and thank you for joining us on Law Talk.
Representation for a legal matter, please visit us at attorneysforfreedom.com.